Remember the swine flu scare of 1976? That was the year the U.S. government told us all that swine flu could turn out to be a killer that could spread across the nation. And Washington decided that every man, woman, and child in the nation should get a shot to prevent a nationwide outbreak, a pandemic. Dr. David Sencer, then head of the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, is now in private industry. He devised the swine flu program, and he pushed it. You began to give flu shots to the American people in October of 76.
October 1st.
By that time, how many cases of swine flu around the world had been reported?
There had been several reported, but none confirmed.
Where did this so-called deadly variety of flu, where did it first hit back in 1976? It began right here at Fort Dix in New Jersey in January of that year when a number of recruits began to complain of respiratory ailments, something like the common cold.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Saturday, February 7th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Going to be a shorter show today. I'm focusing on one main topic. I'm going to give you some updates on a couple of Epstein things on the latter half of the show, but I want to start with something that Orwell's been sharing some stuff with me around the a couple of different stories that I've been keeping off to the side around the Biolab conversation, one that she sent me around Fort Detrick that I want to discuss today, but just the interesting connection to this story, to the last story that I know is in the reporting, but I find that hard. I don't see that being represented. So in Las Vegas, if you haven't seen the story, there was another one of these biolabs and I put it in quotes for a reason. We'll get into that. In California, I believe it was Reedley, California, there was an example of that happening, was a year and a half ago or so, in regard to the Biolab owned by a Chinese national that was supposed to be some kind of a COVID-19 origin point kind of a discussion. And we should very much be considering that, except for the fact that it was, there was a lot. I don't want to go all the way through that last story. We'll go into it. We're going to cover the connection to this one. But remember, we're talking about a building that was using utilities. There was a hose coming out of the side of the stucco wall. Like, it's very clear that somebody was aware of what was going on. If there was, especially since there was resources being used, water, refrigeration, and yet we still, to this very day, don't really have much information. And still to this very day, don't even know what they supposedly found out those things were, if they ever tested them to begin with. And you can check that for yourself. The whole thing was, the worry and the hazmats was for the concern, because the label said Ebola, COVID, and whatever else it said. And they said, we're going to be testing. We sent hundreds to the lab. And to this very day, if you look into the research and ask anything you want, it'll tell you that ultimately right now, we've never gotten any more information about what those were. As to how do we know they were even tested? How do we know, so we should be questioning that story. My point was, at that point of the story, we covered this as we should be considering this could be some China something. It could be somebody using Chinese nationals to cover what they were doing. It could be something our government's doing. All of these are very possible, but as usual, the partisan media tried to make it what they wanted for what suited their interest and now today we have another story around Las Vegas. So again, these are important stories that we shouldn't dismiss, especially, if partisans covering it, it shouldn't be something we reflexively dismiss. We should go into these. We should research them. And as I'm going through this, one part that wasn't really included in most of the coverage, even though it is represented in many mainstream articles, is that this person we're going to get into had a French passport and an Israeli passport and an Israeli citizen. And yet the discussions about a Chinese national who owns this, there is a Chinese connection to this. But so I want to discuss this with an objective view and think about what this could be. And we're going to get into the weird way this went down in this location and the fact that this one is connected to the one in California, and a simultaneous story that may or may not be connected, but I find it relevant with the topic, where Fort Detrick is dealing with, they're investigating, so we're being told, essentially sabotage, holes being cut in their suits. And this is BSL-4. This is Ebola, COVID, some of the word, whatever they what aside from the concern, the questioning about what that is, if it's even there, and I'm right there with you, the point is what they're framing it as, the worst of the worst, right? And they say they're working on all these terrible things. And remember, going back before that, Fort Detrick is the lab that is notorious for leaks. Or again, whether that's a cover story or a manufacturer, the point is the story is that these are things that they told you, that Fort Detrick is notorious for having mistakes for leak. The one I reference all the time, and this is reporting from the government. I believe it was one. I'm going to misquote it. It's been a while since I've looked it up, but the point was they had frequently recurring mistakes. And I mean mistakes like, and this is one example, having a sample go out on the bottom of your shoe or having dangerous things put in the garbage can. And we're talking about high level, pandemic level stuff. And it's just crazy that's even a circumstance we allow. That went on forever. And again, it was something like 3 things every year for 7 years, like this nonstop. It just was continual. And so the problem is that opens a door for, oopsie mistakes where things can get out, or the usable circumstance to rationalize whatever an agenda is, or whatever you want to look at it as. And that was the place that had a leak and a mistake and an issue right before whatever we call COVID-19. However you want to look at that. Because I considered that itself was sort of a place that it was an excuse, a manufactured narrative to justify what we're talking about. But you could just as easily look at that and say they're just clumsy and they made a mistake and this got out and they're trying to cover it up. Occam's razor, that's more likely, right? But so for today's conversation around this other one, I find it interesting the partisan media is making about a Chinese national. And then once the Israeli part came out, it's as if the story doesn't exist anymore. It reminds me of the guy who was crossing the border around the Gaza immigration overlap. And they said, oh my God, it's a Palestinian trying to break through the border. And he said, you'll know my name when you find out. Remember that guy? Turned out that guy he's somebody who was working for Mossad. He was a Jordanian national. I covered this. We proved that on the show. And weird how that just no longer mattered anymore. This is what we get from partisan media. But the point of this today is that it's important to see how it could connect to a lot of things. I mean, even if you want to stand back and consider that there's a interconnection between all 3 of these nations, so let's go into this information. And I think it's important for us to think about how it ties into the larger conversation of what's going on in the world. 2 ways to look at it, or possible, considerations. You have a state right now as an Israeli citizen who's involved that's floundering, that is falling apart. People are seeing through it, and just simply creating chaotic situations enough would make sense to me. But then you have the overlap of the joint agenda, the global direction that Trump is very much involved with, if not building, and what these kind of events help create. It's worth thinking about all this stuff. So I want to start actually, I think I was actually going to open with, I ended up going with the Fort Detrick clip, but just since I have this in here, I think it's kind of funny. I'll start with this. Just a quick shout out to Truth Stream Media, because I'm a big fan of their work, always have been. And they're technically part of the IMA. Here is a post that came out from Twitter, saying from the creator's account. You thought the fun was over this weekend? Video takes the center stage in your timeline. We're giving away millions and hundreds of thousands if you create a video basically using Grok and AI and so on. Like really just trying to drive people into this, right? And you could think it's benign or not. I just did the joke meme of this is fine. And then True Stream Media posted this underneath this, just, I guess she'll put it in front of me. And this is what she posted. Here's our last minute entry for the Grok Imagine commercial contest. I just love this. Like I tweeted this out elsewhere and said, look, if you're not following True Stream Media, you should be following True Stream Media. It just kills me. And so I want to play this really quickly because this is supposed to be like a promotion of Grok. And this is what you get from the nonpartisan, objective, independent media.
Breaking news, an incident is unfolding.
This is a mistake! A number of leading CEOs were arrested at a party after the newest file release.
The 16th Amendment has finally been repealed.
This is closed forever.
Experiments to dim the sun were ruled a crime against humanity.
After a century, the country can finally return to sound money.
What?
We have rights!
I just love that. Obviously not what they're looking for, right? Shout out to True Stream Media. Now, let's get right into the main point here. And I want to start with something that I think is, I feel it's building a narrative. I was hesitating only because I don't want to frame, I don't know this person's intention. I don't know what their mind is behind this. This could be something that they genuinely believe is in our interest. And who knows, maybe people believe it is. Maybe it actually can be, even with the concerns. That's not where my mind's at. But we're talking about mRNA and the use of mRNA now, like not in the context of before, even though that was the way they were framing it then, but being brought back up as sort of like, hey, we need to get back into mRNA, even though we never stopped with that. I'm going to make that point for the 1,000th time. It seems like nobody knows that. They did not stop with mRNA, guys. They're still making shots, COVID included. But the argument is because they defunded mRNA, even though that didn't happen, like USAID. These are just crazy topics we deal with, that because of that now we can't defend ourselves. Now, this is a pretty highly respected, like national security in multiple factor type of blog called War on the Rocks. Now, question it like anything. I'm not very familiar with it, but just looking into it, it seems like it's got a pretty high reputation around these kind of conversations. And so I did think this was pretty interesting. And it is making a pretty, a case that you might find valid or logical if the argument is that, one, people around the world are rapidly building these things for the sake of using them against everybody else, which is not that crazy. In fact, I think we know our governments are doing that. And on top of that, and then two, the question of whether or not this is, can effectively be used to fight against whatever they claim that is. And I guess three would be whether or not this is ever something we should, the door being opened into this realm. This is gain of function, guys. This is what's so frustrating about it. And this is something that never stopped. So this is going to discuss that argument about why we should be leaning back in. Then we're going to get into the current situations and how interesting I think the connection is. Whether or not this is some planned overlap, the idea that this is being made, and now we have these incidents popping up that are pointed to as this is why we need to. Look, China is trying to do things to us. We need mRNA to defend ourselves. That's not a lone argument from this platform, but this is the argument being made. Defending against the next bioweapon, the mRNA imperative. Jeff Kohler is the person's name. Again, look the person up in the platform, you'll find this pretty widely regarded. And January 28, 2026. That's the highlight is gone. So let's go to this. So it says it should be said up front that as co-founder of Tivard Biosciences, a company developing tRNA, helper molecule that carries the right building blocks to the cell's protein making machinery. There's all sorts of different elements to this. We've talked about tRNA, we've talked about siRNA, we've talked about saRNA. I mean, these are all different variations in this same technological direction, each with their very different use and I guess outcome, but all within the same concerning direction of where this goes, right? I mean, understand RNA is something different than mRNA. These are things that naturally occur versus, I mean, even further, which is interesting. And so with mRNA is the same point, but the mod RNA, this is, one quick side point. This is why it's so frustrating when we get into we talk about this often on other shows, the meaning of words. If we get to a point like right now where we can't even agree on like the basic meaning of words, we can't have a conversation. So when we refer to mRNA, what we're really talking about right now is mod RNA. That's what it is in everything they're using. It is, N1 methyl pseudouridine modified RNA, if I remember off the top of my head. At least that's what was in the COVID shots. I might have said one of those incorrectly. The point is that this is modified. It's not organic. This is genetically engineered. This is GMO food stuff. I mean, it's the same kind of direction, the same kind of people. This is what they're doing in a very broad sense. And so it worries me that this is even continuing and happening. But back to the article, I just want to make that point about how we can't even agree on what we're dealing with. But he's simply saying it should be upfront that he's associated with this, right? So he's got interest in this direction, which is fair to say, but I clearly think that matters, right? It says tRNA-based therapeutics for genetic diseases. I have a commercial stake in the broader RNA medicines field. And remember that somebody can be working on these to help people with genetic diseases with the best of intentions, and maybe they actually can. It's sort of like the Neuralink discussion. Yes, very likely, this, if it works the way they claim, this could help a lot of people. But that's not the only consideration in the conversation. Hypothetically, if it was something that would make everyone's arms work again, but then kill half the population, it's like, maybe that's not a good trade-off. I'm being obviously facetious, but realize that these things, with what we just dealt with, it's obvious that there's risk there. Not that it's everything under the sun in this, but clearly we just saw what this is capable of. So we should not be allowing them to go, look, it'll help in this point. So ignore all the risks, which is how governments tend to operate here. Continuing, it says, I also co-founded the Alliance for mRNA Medicines, a nonprofit organization advancing mRNA technology. So clearly he's interested in this direction and he promotes it. My perspective, however, is based on 3 decades of research in RNA biology, including work in my laboratory that contributed to the design of Spikevax, Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. Right. And that's also that's the Bob Langer. He was the scientific co-founder from Moderna. And this overlaps with all the same stuff we're always talking about, back to from optogenetics, and not necessarily in this shot, but the work they're working on and how all this kind of comes together in a lot of different ways that we've painted over the years. But just recognizing that the COVID-19 Moderna shot is one of the central problems in this entire conversation, and he was involved with designing that and is still promoting it. That speaks volumes to me. But it says, and direct experience with the public-private coordination that made Operation Warp Speed possible to maintain this advantage. So right there, advantage. Are you of the mind that Operation Warp Speed and COVID-19 shots were an advantage to the American people? I disagree. I think you do too. To maintain this advantage, Congress should restore recently cut mRNA research funding. And the Pentagon should establish mRNA biodefense manufacturing as a priority before America's adversaries close the gap. It's the same AI conversation. We got to do it before they do. Who cares about the risks? Because they're going to get there first. That's an insane mindset that drives the world on the precipice of destruction, right? So here we have a point where he's saying we need to renew the cut funding. All they're referring to, guys, is the $500 million contract. That's what everybody points to. You can right now show that there's more than that invested in mRNA all over the map. I'll get into the examples I often show, the many different provable things we can show you that are major million-dollar projects that are continuing. And it's not just about shots. You have to remember this. They mentioned that too. mRNA and other fields are going to continue. Food, whatever else. And these are real things that are happening. So understand that they want you to restore that as if that's the only thing that matters. So I question the intention here because of that, because he must know that there's more than that going on. He's researching it. He's working on it. You think he doesn't know about the other mRNA projects? So you could argue that he believes that this one piece of funding was just that important. And that could be the case. But I question whether or not it's about framing it as it's not happening, even though it is, which is why we need to bring it back, even though it never stopped. He goes on to say, and the Pentagon should establish mRNA biodefense manufacturing as a priority. And this is just, again, because they're going to do it over there. I don't disagree with other bad entities like Israel and others working on exactly that problem. But it matters to me that is that proof? I mean, do you know of that? Or is that just I don't know, it could be happening. I find that to be very relevant. Just the possibility of maybe something happening is not enough for me to do something, to agree to something I believe is bad and dangerous. But hypothetically, if we could go, but look, they're literally building a weapon right there. Okay. Would the answer be do the same thing? Now, let's be clear again. We're talking about mRNA defense. If you already understand that if the mRNA like this can be used for defense or offense, what is that called, ladies and gentlemen? That's called dual use technology. And that is the gain of function conversation. But what we're talking about here is that, well, back to what I was saying, actually, is that the point is, if they're building a weapon, you might want to be like, okay, well, that's a lot. I don't like it, but it could help us defend against that. So first, again, is that do you want to lean into that just because of that and create, or secondarily, is that even the right response? Why would you want to make something, why wouldn't you go after them and stop them from building the bomb? I'm not advocating that. I'm just showing that there are other more logical directions than let's also work on the same alarmingly dangerous thing to stop them from their alarmingly dangerous thing. It just, it's like the idea of nuclear weapons. Think of it like that. Okay, yeah, you can have one. They fire one, you have one too. Okay, then we all die. It doesn't make sense with the way that you really break it down. But it's really about getting us to agree to it. That's what I believe. Now, it goes on to say, what once required advanced national laboratories designing dangerous pathogens or engineering novel biological agents can now be done with modest time and resources. Adversaries can design and deploy engineering threats in weeks, while traditional countermeasures can still take years to develop. Well, gee, where did that technology come from? Why does the guy over there in the cave in the middle of nowhere have that technology? Oh, that's right, because you guys created it. You see how this works? Now, if you believe that what he's saying is these random nobodies over there were able to make this in that small, that's not true. What they're doing is standing on the shoulders of people like this that make it. I mean, you could look at it like they're stealing it or they're giving it to it secretly. My mind is that people like this, often with the best of intentions, make these things and then don't understand that people they're working with are very dangerous and evil people. Or maybe you could argue it's all the same conversation, but if you understand groups like the governments we're working with or the higher level technocrats we're dealing with, you think they're not going to work with they are working with the people committing genocide. They are doing this in the world. So it's worrisome that we can't see how obvious that is. And it says, the widening gap between the speed of potential attackers and the sluggishness of America's defenses is one of the most urgent national security challenges of our generation. I mean, really, that is The need to make this mRNA defense, as you frame it, because of what they're building that I don't think we can truly demonstrate is actually happening, even though I don't doubt it, is the most challenging security. Really? What about any number of like borderline World War III circumstance? I mean, you see it. This is in their minds the end all be all. And you could argue from their perspective, they might see it that way. What I'm trying to get at is that I feel like this is building this for a clear, to get us in a certain mindset for what's coming. And it goes on, that gap continues to widen with each new technological advance. Researchers recently created the first AI-designed viruses. Well, we all talked about this. This is, I even had an interview with George Webb about that way back when in regard to the idea of where the COVID-19 situation was going to be going into AI-designed vaccines and virus and everything else. And again, do you think that they built AI and that? No, this is from people like Musk and the rest who are building these things, and then it gets used and they can go, oh, now we have to do more because they can use it too. Maybe we should have just not let this happen in the first place. Now, I know it's kind of a naive statement, seeing as how you can prove other governments are doing it, even though we might not, but it's still the right mindset to look at it. And, doing the wrong thing because they are, I always point that out, is not the correct path. These experiments were carried out under strict safeguards for beneficial purposes. Well, that's a very generous way to frame what's going on. The underlying methods training generative models on viral genomics are becoming increasingly sophisticated and not limited to safe applications. Well, who are we talking about? That's you guys doing that. Like, the mainstream. That is the US, Israel, UK. These are the groups who are working on these next generation applications. So it's interesting that, yes, we're all concerned about that. But as you highlight the concern that you guys are building, you're using that to argue that that's why we need to make defense, because that's possible. Well, it's possible because you're building it. What now requires a sophisticated team of researchers will become accessible to smaller actors. Same argument. If the threat landscape is accelerating, our biodefense strategy should accelerate even faster. Why is that logic to anybody? So we need to go as fast as possible in a dangerous situation because you claim the threat is accelerating, even if it is. The argument, and this is like with the COVID argument, we need to go as fast as we possibly can. Well, gee, I can point out 100,000, quote, mistakes that took place during that rushed period because you guys told us you had to hurry. But we all, I hope, know by now that that wasn't an accident. Clearly, much of that was by design. But I just want to argue, even if it wasn't, this is the same argument, that we need to hurry up and accelerate even faster into a direction that is unprecedented and chaotic and full of possible side effects and issues. But hurry, 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 because they're doing it first. Doesn't that seem like what our government does with everything right now? During COVID-19, researchers quickly obtained the viral genetic sequence, which again, for crying out loud, I bet you I even have that video still on here. Let me look real quick. This is the same things we talked about over and over. And what's interesting is right now, what I keep highlighting is this weird situation. It's not abnormal. It's been around forever, but more than I've seen, where there'll be just this is an obvious thing. And then everyone just names it something else and just lies right to your face. So in this case, we have even China claiming that they did not sequence the virus right here. Isolate. Now, you could argue they're lying, of course, but remember, this is backed up by numerous studies. This comes down to, when you get into it, the point of Koch's postulates and the reality of whether they even met that, and you could prove they never have. People disagree, but if you go right down the line, it just comes to we're talking about semantics. Okay, fine. But you still didn't do explicitly what that last step requires. Whole other conversation. I'm not going to get into it now. We've had it many times, but here is what China said.
And why has the data not been shared?
No, they didn't isolate the virus. That's the issue.
He's saying they didn't isolate it, and that's the issue. That's from the beginning. Now, if you understand, and I can go back through all of this, I have it all saved from the Moderna timeline that they posted, then deleted, but I still have saved an archive that shows you what their timeline was and how quickly it went from China saying, here's the thing, to them having something putting in people's arms. If I remember correctly, we're talking months here before they had the sequence they claim was ready. And that's the same sequence they used all the way till they started shifting into the shots. So the point is, if China's going, well, we never isolated the virus, and you're using the sequence they pointed to, you can prove that wasn't the case, even if they later did it. It's not hard to understand, but this just becomes such, people run from these conversations because there's so many large, confident names out there yelling you down who rightly or obviously have more scientific research in the knowledge and education. Well, then you listen to what they have to say, but understand how easy it is to prove the timeline and the reality of when they claim it even happened was after the fact that they made the Moderna sequence. I mean, it's just basic understanding here, guys, but this is what, gets buried under screaming people out there. But so during COVID-19, they quickly obtained the viral genetic sequence, providing everything needed to begin developing an mRNA vaccine. Apparently, it took a couple days, right? The vaccine was also designed quickly, even though it would still take clinical trials involving tens of thousands of patients to prove its safety and efficacy, which didn't happen. Then we could talk about Brooke Jackson. We could talk about any number of things in regard to the so-called trials, a couple rats, and all these different examples we could point out. But here he is saying that. Now, it's possible, too, that he just still doesn't know that or doesn't care, doesn't believe it. That's crazy to me. But this isn't even the point, really. It's just interesting, the framing of the perspective of before. Close coordination between the government and private sector under President Trump's leadership made the unthinkable possible. Okay, so he's pro-Trump, apparently. But the point here is that it's about we need Trump to do this again. So maybe he's not, and he just wants to stroke his ego and go, please bring back the mRNA that never actually stopped. But at least now start claiming out loud that we're going to lean into it. The same technology that enabled a rapid response during the pandemic can be decisive against engineered threats. Can it? Are we of the mind that they prove the efficacy and blanking on the word that, efficacy works, but, are we of the mind that they prove that these things actually function the way they claim they did? Really? I mean, in my mind, not just the mRNA technology, the platform itself, like the whole damn thing was shown to be rife with mistakes, if that was mistakes, or if they were, or just completely like I mean, God, I don't want to get pulled into going over the entire COVID conversation again, just because I want to make this not as long as it needs to be, but realize that these are basic things that people broke down, myself included, during this entire conversation. This didn't work. What they did hurt people. And it's not that it hurt people in addition to doing what it was supposed to. If you understand the information, the statistics that they released, the benefits did not outweigh the risk. It did not, in many cases, even function the way that they claimed it did. In fact, it just killed people. But here we are, that we can use it to fight back. Even if it ends up fighting back against something, there are going to be problems with all of this. Now it goes forward saying, unlike traditional vaccines dedicated to specific pathogens, mRNA manufacturing, the word's not being, it's fuzzy for some reason. Here, let me just do this. It's only one word, but unlike traditional vaccines dedicated to specific pathogens, mRNA manufacturers, it does say pivots. I thought that looked different. It says mRNA manufacturing, unlike traditional vaccines dedicated to specific pathogens, mRNA manufacturing pivots rapidly between new countermeasures by changing only the RNA sequence. Well, we saw how that worked, guys. Kind of an Omicron and all the different games that were played and don't worry, all we got to do is pump in the new thing. And then guess what? It killed people. And guess what? People got immune systems collapsing and all sorts of cancers. And yeah, but it works though. Against the thing that was likely a flu that wasn't going to hurt people. You guys know all of this. But updating software while keeping its hardware constant. Right back to the plug and play dynamic that they really didn't want you to see after it became too weird for everybody. Advances in miniaturization are moving toward deployable systems, able to operate in forward bases or even battlefield conditions. Funny how they use the word miniaturization. I'm trying to think of a funny example. That's like saying, talking about, I can't even think of a good one, but we're talking about nanotechnology here, guys. We're talking about microscopic. It's just like calling it a bunch of midgets or whatever you want to call it. We're talking about microscopic things, and he calls it miniaturization. I personally find that an effort to try to hide from what that is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading into it what I want, but my God, advances in miniaturization makes me think of what's that movie called? My mind, the word takes me to it's the inner space, the shrinking of the thing and going in the body. We're talking about obvious technology has been around for a long time. And, the lipid nanoparticles are a part of that as well. Moving toward deployable systems, really? Moving toward decades ago. I mean, anyway, this is weird the way this is being framed, but it says, yet just as the mRNA capability becomes essential to its expansion critical, the United States is retreating from it. Hardly. I'll prove that to you in a second, that's not true. In August, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services discontinued approximately $500 million. That's it. Now, I shouldn't say it's a small amount, but realize that was a contract that had been there. There's plenty more contracts. And on top of that, what I proved to you was the $500 million, I don't say half, a good chunk of it were contracts that were already coming to an end. So they just said, we're ending them right away. And it was already coming to an end, many of which were from the Biden administration forward and overlapping from even before from Trump's administration. The point is, many of them didn't even end. I went over this recently. So they say this, they point to a bunch of it, and a lot of these things didn't even actually end. On top of that, they started and continued plenty of others. It's just it's a straight dishonesty. The decision sent a chill through the biotechnology sector. That's how they want you to read this, right? Like everyone's so up in arms because Trump did what he promised. Did he? Seems like a pretty self-serving narrative that's framed as fighting the other side, right? But it says defense funding alone cannot fill this gap. Biodefense programs funded through the U.S. Department of Defense are mission-specific and threat-focused. Restoring this capability requires two complementary actions. First, Congress should restore the $500 million in lost mRNA research funding. This would not only help rebuild the civilian research base, but send a strong message from Capitol Hill that policymakers understand the strategic value of mRNA technology. Second, the Department of Defense should establish a dedicated biodefense manufacturing initiative. See, so not only we're going to not just start it again, but literally turn the machine into an mRNA factory, the U.S. military machine, which is kind of what it already was, aiming at. The Department of Defense should establish a dedicated biodefense manufacturing initiative. The Department of Defense's BioMade program supports bioindustrial manufacturing, fuels, textiles, chemicals, but mRNA countermeasures require fundamentally different infrastructure. So what he's saying, we need a mRNA-focused entity. No current Department of Defense program provides this capability. Neither action alone is sufficient, but both are necessary to maintain American leadership in mRNA innovation. Oh, wait, I thought it was about protecting ourselves and keeping safe from evil boogeyman. Oh, but I guess it was really about maintaining preeminence of the American state, right? American leadership in mRNA innovation, which is very different than defending yourself against bad guys in the world. And he writes, the integrated capability that the public and private sectors, public-private, like World Economic Forum, it's not a secret, demonstrated under President Trump's past leadership. Right. The public-private partnership that the Republicans were all fighting when it was Biden, but now it's great because Trump's winning. It's the same damn thing. I mean, what's so crazy, it's not even the same globalist thing. It is, but it's not even just that. It's not even just the same Davos overlap. It's not even, it's all of it. It's the same COVID-19 discussion. It's the same vaccine conversation. The only difference is you just name it something else. You call it something else. Just like, it's not gain of function. It's EPPP. It's the same thing. Except in this case, it's not a different name for the thing. It's just, we're not doing that. You can't see it anymore. And then they keep going. That's how stupid it feels to me. It's very obvious this isn't stopping. So on that, and really quickly, since I was pointing to him, we'll come back to it. There's tons of these, and I should grab this one too. This is the one that always makes me laugh, is that you can quite literally look up the 2026 Comirnaty shot, the literal Comirnaty COVID-19 shot, and it's being given right now. This was put out August 27, 2025, Trump's administration, after they said they were ending mRNA. 2025, 2026, COVID-19 shot, SARS-CoV-2. It's like we're speaking to a wall. How is it possible that in a conversation full of people claiming they're the media, that people don't know that they're still building mRNA shots? There it is. Pfizer. Oh, don't forget, Trump's partnered with Pfizer now. And that's totally great, I guess. Doesn't matter. But on top of that, we have the Arcturus shot. Self-amplifying. That's the real direction I think they're pivoting into. Self-amplifying. That is still continuing. They didn't stop it. And he, by name, said that Arcturus was not going to stop. Self-amplifying mRNA COVID shots too. Great. That's not stopping. We also have, I think it was Amplitude Therapeutics and plenty of others that are currently being worked on, that are COVID, that are mRNA. You all know that because you watch this show. But frustratingly, it doesn't seem to break through to anybody that needs to see it. And that's how the suppression and algorithmic suppression works. So here's Libs of TikTok. The feds just discovered an illegal biolab in Las Vegas. The owner of the property is Chinese national who previously arrested in connection to the California biolab. Okay. Well, yeah, that seems to be what's going on, except the fact that it's not the full story. And this is being reported because I honestly think this person who seems to not even know the name Epstein anymore is going, look at this thing. Oh, my God. And what Muslims in the UK and Elon Musk is right about censorship over there. Just anything else, anything. On top of that, this is something that, what are the, election stealing, COVID-19, biolabs, China, Muslims. You just yell a story like that and you're going to get all the team sport idiots out there jumping on it because that's what they're into. Doesn't mean they're not important, but this is what these kind of people do, is grab onto it. Elon will scream something. This is how it tends to work on both sides, by the way. But so what I think is interesting is that after this came out, it developed a little bit, right? More information comes out, and it turns out that it's an Israeli. Well, weird how they never followed up on that story. Not that they have to, but something under Biolab, you'd think that they would go, oh, well, developing story as a journalist, that this is the next part of the story. No. That's not what they do. So you might want to reevaluate the word journalist there. But here's the real point, guys. And there's a couple different articles I'll show you. This one is just from a local NBC. And here's the name of the guy. Picture of the guy, Ori Solomon, or slight different. There's also another variation of the name. Here's what's interesting to me. First, before we even get into it, and just you can see the investigation centers on Ori Solomon, an Israeli citizen and property manager of this location. What's interesting to me, right, is you stand back objectively, like, okay, this could very well still be China alone, who just happens to work with Israeli. I mean, are we of the mind that only Israel and the U.S. know how to pretend they're someone else? No, of course not. This could just as easily be China doing this for their own purposes. I mean, even if it's even not even connected to anything else, and I genuinely believe that this could very much just be their interest. But when you take in the full picture and all the evidence, it doesn't seem to be the most likely to me. But you could consider, right, it could also just be the U.S. government by itself, using a Chinese person involved with the media location, the manager being an Israeli, and just making, to muddy the waters. So honestly, that one's higher up on the list for me because of what we know they're doing and what they're drowning in. But the other possibility is that this is an Israeli operation. And this is about many different things, including distraction, creating the chaos in this country that I believe is a part of it, but also the idea of creating the larger global dynamic around where this goes. And all of us, largely Republicans, back before we got into the current chaos that we're in, we're all kind of on the edge of our seats going, what's the next pandemic discussion? Are they going to frame another lie? Is it going to be something that actually happens? So, like we all talked about this. So that's something we should consider. And that Israel was a leader, along with the US and UK, in this pandemic lockstep conversation. So keeping this in mind, don't take this as just because he's Israeli, therefore we know it's Israel. That's not the case. But it matters with what we know Israel's involved in and how, more than any group, what we can see is this use of, dressing up like Palestinians and shooting people, or creating sort of like a Muslim facade in order to carry out different terrorist acts. So this could very well be something like that. So consider this as we go forward. This is Channel 13 ABC, property manager facing additional gun charges. Now, the weird overlap with the gun charges I find interesting because that was a secondary thing. They show up and they see guns. They don't even take them because they don't have it's not in their warrant. Look at that. Amazing. But people would actually have warrants and follow the law, So like a mirage today. It says, we previously told you about Ori Solomon, who was booked into the Clark County Jail for a felony charge of improperly disposing of hazardous waste. So realize that already he's been charged and as far as I can tell, already been let go, which I find insane with what we're talking about. We'll get to that. But that it was disposing of hazardous waste. Okay, so we're talking about labels and things he had in these with like Ebola and names on them. And your charge is disposing of hazardous waste. Well, if it's hazardous, then which one was hazardous? And see, this is still going. So I'm not going to, they may still be researching, right? They sent to the lab. My point is the last one from California, we never found out what they said those were. I don't think they were anything. That's my gut. I think we're talking about something that was made to look like the way they're framing it. That's how it felt because it didn't seem like, and they just never followed up, or alternatively, that it turned out to be very real and they didn't want to highlight who it came back, tied back to. My point is we don't know, right? But these are all considerations. But so he was arrested and charged with a felony for disposing of hazardous waste. According to a federal criminal complaint, during a search of Solomon's residence on January 31st, 2026, officers found a room that appeared to be his office. Inside, they found a wallet and his name, a French passport bearing the name Ori Solomon, slightly different, and an Israeli passport with the name Ori Solomon, one spelled with an A in the beginning, one with an O. Now, there are people that have multiple passports, yes. Usually not spelled differently, though, unless certain circumstances based on language differences. But realize, people that have Israeli and French passports in this kind of, they don't, especially when they're maybe operating an illegal biolab, and the rest you're going to read here in a second, doesn't that scream some kind of operation or intelligence? It does to me. Doesn't prove it. Could just have two passports. But I think that's what seems to suggest to me. And it continues. Also inside the office, authorities saw 2 9mm bullets on the computer stand and located a black Glock semi-automatic pistol on the side cabinet. However, because the search warrant didn't include a seizure of firearms, the gun was left in the residence. Now, here's what's interesting. We'll show you next. Solomon was on a work visa. Hey, look, it's an immigration thing. But I guess they don't care about it because it's an Israeli immigrant. So he's okay. He can do whatever he wants. He can run an illegal biolab and shoot people, and that doesn't matter because he's Israeli. I'm obviously being facetious, but isn't it interesting? There's more than just brown people with the immigration conversation, guys. And anyway, the point here is that they knew this, and they see guns. You know, see what I'm saying? It's an interesting, okay, if you're there and you know who he is, then wouldn't that immediately be a violation? It's interesting, right? But it says the next day, Solomon reportedly made a call while in Clark County Jail. I find this interesting. To a phone number listed for his adult daughter. During the call, records say Solomon asked, quote, "Is there any guns left?" That is a very weird question to ask. Not like, is my gun still there? But is there any guns left? Is there any guns left in the house, or did they confiscate it? Now, maybe the language barrier, and that's just, but see, that statement seems to suggest, like, do we still have the guns? Can we still operate? Just my opinion, just the way, maybe that's me reading in how I think it's going, but I find that standout. And it says investigation into Solomon's immigration status prevents him from owning guns. That's my point. They would have known this going there, right? So they wouldn't have needed to come back for the way. I find that a weird circumstance. He is currently in the U.S. under an E-2 non-immigrant visa. On Monday, February 2nd, a search warrant was granted for Solomon's home to include the seizure of guns. Now, in E2, I'm not familiar with E2 non-immigrant visa. If you know about that in the chat, what do you think about that? What is that? I mean, is that what any immigrant gets? What's a non-immigrant visa? I mean, is that because he's Israeli? That's not some slight. The reality is Israel's immigration is very different with this country. They basically doesn't exist, if you want to be honest about that. They also give them U.S. passports to go, and I mean like an intelligence side of it, to access Iraq and other places. This has been proven many times over. It's all illegal, by the way. But when it says an E-2 non-immigrant visa, I just think that's interesting. Why did he get that? Shouldn't we trace that back? Is he doing something illegal? Was he allowed to be here? Like, who gave him that, guys? I find that relevant. If it's a Chinese national, are we suggesting the U.S. government is giving non-immigrant visas to Chinese nationals who are doing, it's a weird overlap. Something about this stands out to me. Let me know what you think. On Monday, February 2nd, a search warrant was granted for Solomon's home to include the seizure of guns, ammo, related items. During the search, authorities seized 6 guns, ammunition, and firearm accessories. That included 4 handguns and 2 rifles. Now, here's what I find this interesting, because we just talked about, the Halloween plot, which I challenge everybody to go look. Tell me what happened. It's funny how that just never talks about it again. It was, I told you it was going to be hype, and but either way, the point is all the guns they had. They were terrorists because they went to shooting ranges, and they, like any terrorist American out there shooting their guns at a shooting range. They had lots of weapons and ammo, like most gun owners, guys. But what's crazy to me is that in this case, you're talking about this guy is not even, he's on an immigrant visa or non-immigrant visa, and he's got 6 guns and ammunition. I'm not seeing people calling him a terrorist. I'm not seeing that. It's weird the way, I think it's quite obvious, the way the media, left and right, mainstream, alternative, and mainstream decide to just selectively frame it the way they want to when they want, which really has very little to do with what's actually happening. Now it says Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Sheriff Kevin McMahill said investigators recovered, quote, evidence of possible biological material, including refrigerators with vials containing unknown liquids. So the only reason it's possible is because they had labels on them. So we need to demand to know what it is. Just in my opinion, because this is a weird continuing thing. And I'll show you again with the reporting. We still don't know what happened from the last one, which tells me that, if they found something bad in those things and didn't tell us, that tells me they're covering up for somebody. You know what I think? If they found them and there was nothing bad in them, they didn't tell you, that means they don't want to be embarrassed by, I'm obviously giving my opinion, but if they didn't find anything bad in there, wouldn't they want you to know that? If they're honest? Yeah. This seems to be like maybe they just overblew the story. At the end of the day, we need to demand the follow-up, don't we? And this is possible. That's where we are. Now, it says that Channel 13 reported the home is owned by an LLC registered to a Chinese citizen who was linked to similar investigations in Reedley, California. So this gets interesting, right? This guy's the property manager of the Biolab. His home is owned by the person who's linked to the California Biolab. So to me, this starts to paint a very interesting picture. You can't put this away anymore. This is either China literally using Israeli citizens to carry this out, or the U.S. doing the same thing, or this is an Israeli operation using Chinese entities because they know how that will be framed. All of those are possible. But at this point, we can't hide. That's not a coincidence, guys. And the person's name, oh, they didn't have in this article. It's right here. The person's name we're talking about, and I'm going to come to this in a second, is Xiaobei Zhu, the Chinese citizen who was arrested in October 2023 in connection with the other one. But here's what it says right here. They were only ever charged or arrested in connection with manufacturing and distributing misbranded medical devices and false statements. What about all the Biolab material they illegally held? So that means to me that there wasn't anything dangerous, or they didn't want you to know what they found. Like I just said. It's weird, isn't it? Wouldn't you expect a follow-up to something that crazy? And also find it very telling that the libs of TikToks of the world never follow up. Look at this thing, crazy. Now the next flashy story, the next thing I support the current thing. Never go back and go, oh, look at that. It turned out to be nothing, because it's not in their interest to show you that they hyped a false story or whatever it means. As Channel 13 reported, the home is owned by an LLC registered to a Chinese citizen. And that very well right there, the citizen we're talking about, could be an entire front. That it's registered to this person, not necessarily that they're there or living in there. Now, what's interesting as well is there's multiple people living in the home that nobody's telling us about. It says, as of Sunday night, sources with knowledge of the investigation told ABC News that investigators were still working to determine what materials they recovered. Vials removed from the home are being taken to the county's secure testing facility for testing to determine whether they are harmful. Watch as we never find out what they were. I hope we do, but based on last time, doesn't seem like they care. Now, this is from News Nation. Nevada judge releases property manager. This is the 7th today. So you're telling me this guy gets arrested, what was it, the second or the third? For possible illegal biolab, like with Ebola and COVID-19, illegal guns. It violates his visa. Like all sorts of wildly concerning things, especially imagine what the Trump administration, ICE and Cash and Bongino and whatever, and Bondi would do to a random guy, immigrant from El Salvador, who had one gun or whatever. They would treat him like a terrorist. They would lock him up. In this case, go ahead. You can go free. We'll deal with you later, Israeli citizen. Do you think that plays a factor? I certainly do. So he's free now with all the things, and it's up in the air. As of right now, it's still up in the air. How do you let someone go under the allegation of what? Bioterrorism? And just let him go? A federal judge ordered, and realize, no, we're not talking about like these are things he was caught with. He's breaking the law because of multiple things. So it's not like you're letting him go because we're still investigating him. He was caught and found, and with the guns and everything, are immediate violation. He shouldn't be let go. A federal judge ordered the release Friday of the property manager connected to the suspected Biolab, who prosecutors charged with unlawfully possessing guns. That's it. Okay. So it's obvious that there's something going on here to me. But like the whole black hole analogy, I don't think we can tell for sure what that is, but it's pretty obvious that there's things being affected by whatever this is. And it's not just one person, one entity. You know, this is something, guys. And that's my opinion. U.S. Magistrate Judge Ilana Yochach released Ori Solomon, 55, on a personal recognizance bond, ordering him to surrender his passport and stay within the continental U.S. Should Solomon leave, he must inform the court. How much you want to bet he goes to Israel? You know my opinion. That's all clearly my opinion. Do you think, this person has a French and Israeli passport. Do you think he's going to stay? And look, if he gives up his passport and still gets out of the country, that should tell you something. Well, I guess we'll wait and see. Now, this will be one I need you guys to remind me of. I want to follow up on this, and I want to find out what happens. A week from now, a month from now, I want to follow up, and I want to know. I think it will matter. So keep it in my ear. Solomon, who is originally from Israel, is in the country on a non-immigrant visa and is barred from owning guns, as we said earlier. During searches, teams recovered guns from Solomon's home. The Las Vegas Biolab is connected to a similar incident in California where officials found infectious agents. But here's what's interesting. This is News Nation, major partisan. That's not the case, though. And this is what I'll show you. They found things they believe to be and then sent to the lab. There has been no verification, as far as I can tell, that they actually found those things there. Now it says, where officials found infectious agents, HIV, malaria, News Nation affiliate, first reported Sunday. An LLC tied to the Combs county records matches the name of a company that is part of an ongoing federal case in California. Same point. Just find that crazy. In that case, a Chinese citizen, David He, faces federal charges for allegedly manufacturing and distributing misbranded medical devices. Now, technically, when we're talking, I actually think this might be a mistake by them. He is the other person involved, but I'm pretty sure it was you who we'll go to the next article. Either way, those two people were involved. I believe it was the other one who was being charged, but I could be mistaken. It goes on to say an attorney for He did not return a request for comment. And the person's name is H.E., does not face charges connected to Las Vegas. He communicated with Solomon in the month before the raid. Okay, there's no way there's a connection here, clearly. According to Metro Police, samples from the Sunrise Manor home were undergoing testing. Okay, so they were in communication. The person who was being charged in connection with the California Biolab with an Israeli citizen, that must matter. What I find telling is how that's nowhere in the conversation, other than people like us who are trying to put it in the conversation. But if you get into the mainstream alternative, mainstream media, this is something that, even though in these articles, seems to be willfully left off, which has kind of always been the way this works. New York Times, FBI investigates links to biological labs in Las Vegas and California. This is federal and local law enforcement officials in Vegas are investigating a possible illegal laboratory. This was on the 6th in the residential subdivision that they say may be linked to another similar investigation. And I appreciate the objectivity, but at this point, if you can prove that the guy is the same guy who owns it, if you can prove that they were communicating, that is a connection. Period. Doesn't need to be proven. There's a connection, but what that means, well, that's what we need to find out. So I just, it's, to me, there's not a may be a link. That there is a link without question. But maybe they're just friends. Maybe that's the link. You see my point? But that's a weird way to frame it. In Las Vegas, Ori Solomon, 55, was charged this week with 1 count of illegal possession of firearms and disposing and discharging of hazardous waste. What kind of waste? Doesn't that matter? What you just get charged with an arbitrary waste disposal? What was he disposing of? Are they Ebola? That certainly matters, doesn't it? Mr. Solomon was believed to be the property manager at the Las Vegas home. A lawyer for Mr. Solomon did not immediately respond. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department first became aware of the possible lab after employees of Solomon reported becoming gravely ill after going into his garage, which contained vials with reddish liquid, according to a police report obtained by Las Vegas Review-Journal. It's funny how these points aren't coming up anywhere else. And so what's crazy to me, and you could read the Las Vegas Review, is that you're saying that his people, who apparently it seems were also living there, but nobody's being told who they are or where they're from, were the ones that ended up pointing to this. They work there. I find that a weird overlap. Now, I mean, you realize we're talking about it's not like, so you're in a room. This is what I find crazy about this reporting. You can see the pictures of like a biolaboratory stuff, right? With the stick. We've seen all these pictures going around. I think they've got one. Oh, it's in the archive. You can find them like here, like this is what they look like, but realize inside, you can see the ice chest in the garage and the different things they're showing. It has the look of something that's not just, oh, those are some beers in there, right? Same with the last one. So my point is, you work there. Are you telling me you weren't able to discern that there was something weird going on there? That you only until I started feeling weird that I'm going to go, hey, there's something weird going on other than the biolaboratory you're working in? Seems like a weird thing to go. So I question what those people are doing there, who they're, whether they're, I question what the involvement is of the 3 people we're going to point to here. Last month, the Las Vegas police received information that laboratory equipment and potentially hazardous materials were likely being kept in that home, according to police statement. Last month? That's interesting. So I guess that could be like January 30th, right? But I just hope that way. If you get, hey, we might have an illegal biolab. Oh, we'll get to it. But it says the police said Mr. Solomon was a main quote, agent and conspirator with someone connected to the investigation into another illegal biological laboratory. That's what the police said. And I find this so telling that the police there, the local police who are investigating this is what always tends to happen. With the Utah investigation, you get the local police who are like, okay, this is child abuse. And then it comes to the higher level in the corporate media and the government, and they step on it, which, hey, Epstein files. I think we know why today. In this case, you're talking about he was, by the local police, called an agent and a conspirator and said it was directly connected to the Biolab, which it is. But yet the reporting has subtly changed, right? And I find it interesting. If the police knew that, I mean, let's be clear. They knew that he was an Israeli right in the beginning, and that didn't really, I mean, this feels controlled. All my opinion. Investigators linked the property owner to a 2023 biological laboratory we discussed, Reedley, California, where investigators found materials, quote, possibly associated with infectious diseases like hepatitis, COVID, HIV. Right, same thing, in a warehouse. Now, Jia Beizhu, a Chinese citizen, was arrested in October 2023 in connection with manufacturing and distributing those misbranded medical devices and making false statements. According to court documents, Mr. Zhu and others made, imported, sold, and distributed hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 test kits, as well as tests for HIV. What an interesting overlap. Now, at the time, in California point, it was like, okay, well, China, right? Because the testing and China and COVID and the whole thing, which is what we should question. But now, with the understanding that Zhu was connected to, Zhu, Z-H-U, was connected to the house where the Israeli citizen lived and seemed to manage this, and he was over here making COVID tests, like you should at least be able to consider that maybe that was an Israeli-run manipulation using these tests, which I am convinced was a huge part of what COVID was. Just consideration. A SWAT team found 3 people. Now, I can't tell whether that's the employees or they live, from the reporting I can see, they have 3 people they found, they say, renting rooms inside the home. Okay, but then if you have employees working in this location, how does that work? And, it's fleshing out. But 3 people living there who may or may not be the same people who called it in, or may or may not be the people that work there. The police say they were not involved and were removed safely. And that's it. Which, if they were just random people, there's no reason we should demand. But, I find that strange. You lived in this home with all the stuff we can see in those pictures, and you didn't find that strange? Tells me that you either didn't care those weird things were going on, or that maybe you were involved with that. And if we're talking about an Israeli operation, I think it's easy to understand, like with was it Abramovich, Tom, the Israeli pedophile or child predator who they just let go back to Israel after he came here to rape children. Not a joke. Literally caught setting up a sting operation trying to get children to come and have sex with him. And the U.S. government let him go back to Israel. It just happened. I'm sure you guys saw that. So in this kind of situation, we should be going, okay, is there something else happening here? Whether that's China, Israel, or anything else. Because Saudi Arabia, for example, I keep pointing that out as well. Same thing as Israel. Saudi Arabians, in many cases, Oregon had a huge case about it, the local police, yet again, saying these people are raping women and just flying back to Saudi Arabia, and the government doesn't care. So ask yourself whether we're talking about, I think it's important to find out who these 3 people were. Investigators focused on the garage and found refrigerators, a freezer, laboratory-type equipment, and numerous containers holding unknown substance. That didn't stand out to anybody. You know what I mean? Like laboratory equipment and cases full of things. To me, the 3 people, the employees, that's clear to me. The items were consistent, and look at the pictures, you'll see the same thing. The items were consistent with what was found in the California investigation. Sheriff Kevin McMahill of the Las Vegas police said at the conference. He said more than 1,000 samples were taken at the scene. The materials were sent to the FBI lab for further testing. Great. Kash Patel will get right on that. The police said the location was safe and that there was no danger to neighbors. He said that a motive remained unclear. So if there's no risk, that means they've either removed everything or they realized it wasn't dangerous. Likely that they sent it away to test it. But to me, this whole thing seems pretty damn strange. Right? With all the different overlaps, the people that were there, the way that this went down, these people are now just vanished into the wind. They were living there while he's working on whatever they claim this is. This stands out to me. Now, asking Grok regarding the Biolab incident in California, have they ever told us what was proven to be in those vials? And you can find this reported in plenty of other locations. No authorities have not definitively proven or confirmed through testing what was actually inside most of those vials. And what's interesting is the CDC on the site basically compiled a list of the 20 potential infectious agents based on visible labels, and that's what everybody reports. And that's where we are. Don't you find that strange? When they were like, good news, everybody, it turned out that wasn't a problem. Well, even if it wasn't, they kind of want you to think that's always looming, in my opinion. So however you look at this, I think it definitely matters they never told us what was in that. Now, an overlapping story to this, technically end of December into January, but pretty much simultaneously happening, especially when you take the California point into the Las Vegas point. In between those times, we have this in December 19th. Now, this very well may this might just be connected because it's the same biolab conversation and no other way. But because of what we're talking about and the concern of what may be happening, And this is being such a clear example of what they are basically calling sabotage. It makes you wonder whether somebody in this conversation, another state, somebody within this country, whatever it is, trying to create either fear or an actual pandemic. Investigation of Fort Detrick lab finds hole in airtight suit was intentional. Breakdown in safety culture. Now, part of me wonders whether that is sort of the people making it about Trump, which is not an unfair statement. The culture of what they've created, not just Trump, is insane. I'm not talking about left versus right. I'm talking about just lawlessness, lying. I mean, the way that they're conducting themselves is just petty, childish, and ridiculous to me. And it's not about left and right. It really is just about power. But in this case, my point being is there is a difference there, but I think I'm just wondering whether this is on top of just the obvious sabotage, the idea that they also just go, oh, and it's because of what he's brought in, consider that. But if they're there, if the people in this lab are continuing, are demonstrating a change in culture and safety, and I mean like literally not just ideas, but that these people are no longer being safe, which is what they're saying, and that started sort of with this change of the guard, it makes you wonder whether that might just be the case. Or, like I'm kind of insinuating or highlighting, it might be deliberate. Consider all of it. Now, this is from the 19th of December, 2025. An investigation into a hole in a hazmat suit used by researchers who work with some of the world's most deadly pathogens at Fort Detrick, spurring a work stoppage, just like before COVID, by the way. 2019. Research into deadly viruses and biological weapons at U.S. Army labs shut down over fears they could escape. Now, just for the record right now, not to put fear unnecessarily, they've already, well, I guess it's just as concerning that it's working. It's back up and running. So don't worry. Fort Detrick is pumping that bad stuff out again. Well, it's interesting, that it shut down. And well, actually, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. In this situation during the COVID-19 timeframe, I believe it shut down and I believe it was back up and running again before the main thing started. Let me know if you think I'm correct about that. There's so many different data points. I'm forgetting whether the timeline overlapped or whether it was down and it was just kind of continually shut down well into when the COVID narrative started. But either way, it's not, it really doesn't change the concern. Like if this shut down, the implication is that there might be a safety risk, right? And if there might be a safety risk, then that means something might have gotten out. Like that's the logic. And so that's one of the concerns. And it says, continuing, so they found that they found the action intentional. I find that very important. The investigation also found a larger breakdown of trust in the leadership, taking safety concerns seriously at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. So right there, you could argue that there's an ideological division. That probably plays a factor in everything today. But do we not also see that generally happening, like this kind of fly by the seat of your pants, kind of, move fast and break things kind of mindset? And so you're wondering whether that might literally, they got rid of all the people that they didn't want, and now the people that are there are basically just whatever Trump needs, who cares about the costs? That's what everything else seems to be like. But it says just basically at Fort Detrick is what we're discussing. Investigators concluded that a hole in a maximum containment lab and the user's airtight protective suit was made intentionally, according to the incident report dated April 4th, that was provided by the National Institute of Health. The Frederick News Post obtained a report on Thursday through a public records request. The investigation could not determine the cause of the hole or who created it. That's pretty unnerving. Actually, I just thought of one thing I want to add really quickly. Hold on one second. Oh, you know what? I don't think I have it anymore. That's too bad. Or maybe I have it in here. There was an old clip that I played about the Fort Detrick. Let's see. Oh, it is right there. Okay, good. I want to play this one next. It's a short clip, it's just the opening clip I have for it, but it's another example of when we get done with this part about Fort Detrick. I'll play this for you just to show you. It's a clip from a documentary about Fort Detrick and how people all around it are getting cancers. It's probably no different than most of these biolabs, especially the ones they have in Georgia, the country that people have been sick around forever because it's not in the United States. No one seems to care. It goes on to say, excuse me, parts of the perimeter of the hole, like around whatever was cut or however it was done, looked cleanly cut while others appeared forcefully separated or ripped apart. The report states part of the suit's face shield was cut away and was never located. Based on the opinion of the numerous subject experts, the investigators concluded the hole was intentionally created. So like, like imagine a thing that would allow, whatever you think about the validity of how that works, the argument being that would allow them to potentially get sick. IRF Frederick's work includes research, this is Fort Detrick, includes research on viruses that cause high consequence diseases, Ebola, COVID-19, according to NIAID's webpage on the facility. Between the time the individual departed the room and with the suit in, quote, excellent condition, to the time they entered and found the hole in the suit, records show there were 68 entries, 2 and 60 departures from the involved changing room. So essentially 60 people, maybe even 60. Well, how would that work? If they came in and all 60 came out? Well, at least 60 people who are potentially responsible. No one interviewed, they say, had witnessed the creation of the hole. And no one who had witnessed it admitted to being involved or had any direct knowledge of how the hole was made. Interesting, especially if they believe it's intentional. That means that somebody in this lab, literally one of the most alarming places in this country, is trying to sabotage it. And we still don't know who it is. In an email to the Frederick News Post in May, NIH said the decision to stop all work at the facility followed, quote, identification and documentation of personnel issues involving contract staff that compromise the facility's safety culture. Now, there's a lot of overlaps, whether it's Israel or anybody else. There are points in which there's other people that come through this location. But I can't find for the life of me what contract staff could very well just mean scientists in the U.S., right? But they're the ones that compromise the safety culture. That's a very specific statement. So you're trying to figure out who and the staff who compromised. Okay, so the lab's back up and running right now. To the best of my knowledge, I can't find a report about how you found somebody, how you caught the guy. So what's happening right now? You have somebody in this lab that wants to sabotage what's happening, and you either didn't tell us who that was or you never found out and you started working again anyway. That seems concerning. 2 weeks after the stand down began, NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya wrote on Twitter that, quote, a contractor at the lab had deliberately cut a hole in the biocontaminant suit over a personal dispute with a coworker. To me, that sounds like they know exactly who it was and exactly why it happened. And yet we don't get to know. Isn't that a major deal? I mean, that's a national security issue. If you're talking about people who are if it literally is a petty dispute to the point to where you want to sabotage somebody with a pandemic, whatever you want to call it, an Ebola risk or whatever it is, and whatever you think about that, the idea being that seems like, I mean, it either speaks to the culture they were pointing to, that somebody in this position with how serious this is would take that action for, either that or something much different, much larger that we're hiding behind the story, right? Or that, what was the other part I was going to say? Anyway, just at the end of the day, this is something that seems they know. I find it crazy that we don't know who that is if the argument is you potentially did something like that. And it says what they wear when they're dealing with dangerous pathogens. And it says an ongoing investigation revealed a pattern, even worse, going back to the Biden administration. This is his quote from Trump's administration. An ongoing investigation revealed a pattern going back to the Biden administration of safety not taken as seriously as it ought. Okay. So yeah, Biden bad. And us too, though, because we're doing it right now. Okay. Or is it that it carried over from Biden? Aren't we just tired of this lazy argument? Guess what, though? It still happened in Trump's last administration. Guess what, Bhattacharya? It happened under Obama's administration. Guess what? Can we keep going? Goes back. I just played the opening clip. I mean, this is ridiculous. The argument that the safety issues that have been going on for decades suddenly happened in Biden, and that's why it's still there. That's lazy, Jay. You could do better than that. Or that's what he's being told to say, which is what all the rest of the yes men in this administration seem to be doing. It makes me sad that somebody like this, who in other situations was staying, why would you put, like Gabbard, for example, why do you put yourself in that position to be made the fool for Trump or whoever, for the globalist agenda this government is right now? But to me, that's frustrating. And it goes on to say, so with RFK Jr.'s blessing, I immediately ordered all work to halt and all dangerous pathogens secured. And now it's up and running again, though. Bhattacharya further stated he would not reopen the lab until he was satisfied that work can be done there with zero risk to public safety. Well, that's been a risk from this lab as far as I've been alive. Well, here's a good place to play this clip because this risk is still there right now.
We have over 1,300 documented cancer victims right now, just in a 1 mile radius. I'll be quite honest with you, it's changed my life so radically. Sometimes I don't even know who I am.
1,300 people in a 1-mile radius. And what's causing so much sickness? It turns out all these victims have one thing in common. They live next to a military base called Fort Detrick.
God, that's so hard to ignore. Now, I've just off the top of my head grabbed that. I'll try to find it and include the documentary so you guys can have that. And I might want to go through the longer clip of that in another show because it gets into the children, the people that go to high school there. And there's the common knowledge. They all know we should you don't drink the water here. That's insane. That's an American city that's you'll get sick drinking the water. On top of that, people around there get sick. They all know that. There's all kind of weird things. It's a collective understanding there. It just blows my mind. So back to the point, him saying, don't worry, we're going to make sure there's no risk. Too late. It's already there. Simply because you're working on gain of function, first of all. Secondarily, because this lab has been rife with these problems till this very moment as far as I've been here. So that's just, again, in case you missed the third time I said it, it's back open right now. And this is what he said here is interesting to me. He further stated he would not reopen the lab until he's satisfied that there's zero risk to the public, alluding to the possibility of, quote, lab-generated pandemics. Well, so you literally just suggested, which we know that this is a place that could do that. And you're still working on it. And it's still open. Okay, just make sure we're clear on that. Let's reopen that and keep the threat of lab-generated pandemics continuing. Kennedy said HHS brought in the FBI. Every time I hear that these days, I've always had I think, accurately low opinion of the FBI and what they really are, just a very anti-American institution. I've made that very clear argument in the past about what they've always seemed to have done, and it is not in the interest with it's not in line with the Constitution in my mind. And that does not mean, by the way, that everybody working there is in line of that mind or that they all do bad things, just like people in the military. Whether or not I believe I understand the reality of what the government's doing doesn't mean that people that go there with what they believe is the right intention, but they're misled, doesn't make them bad people. They thought they were going to fight for you. That makes them a good person. At the end of the day, they were lied to. It's the same kind of thing to consider. But my point is, with Kash Patel leading this institution, when they get involved, I'm like, great, what's going to happen now? Kennedy said, hey, they brought in the FBI to investigate the alleged issue. Well, I'm sure as soon as they found out it was something connected to anything that makes Trump look bad, they just shut it all down. That's how this works. It appears, and look, we just went over this yesterday in regard to what Kash Patel and Bondi are doing with the Epstein files, or tons of examples where in the moment they find out it's uncomfortable for Trump, they will close it down, even if it's of the utmost importance to you and the American people. It appears, quote, that it was a deliberate criminal act. That's a much more strong statement than voluntary or the deliberate. A criminal act that is equivalent to attempted murder because the kind of microbes and pathogens they were handling had a very high case fatality rate. Up to 50. That's Kennedy said that. Okay, well then why is it up and running again? If you're telling me this guy with attempted murder, why isn't he being arrested and charged for a crime? And you told me it was a work dispute. I just think this is so strange. The investigation also found other safety protocols were violated at the facility. Yeah, no big deal. It's back up and running. It's like everything else we're dealing with. It's like, it feels like as long as they look, a thing happened and it's bad. And we all go, whoa, bad. They just go right back to doing it. Look at all the Epstein stuff, bad. And now no one's arrested. Let's go right back to it. Now, we're all pointing this out right now. It's pacification, not accountability. So in this case, other safety protocols seems to be the status quo for this location. The report states that in other incidents, an individual had knowingly entered. This is crazy to me. Knowingly entered inaccurate information on a suit test log. So not just, I'm going to cut a hole in your suit and try to kill you, but you're surreptitiously behind the scenes entering in inaccurate information. To me, that does not speak to a petty coworker dispute. That is a planned, coordinated disaster. My opinion. Entered inaccurate information in a suit log. And there's more than this. And an individual failed to follow procedures for reporting and repairing a hole in their suit that led to an infiltration of liquid on multiple occasions. That's a separate incident. So here you have them cutting a hole in somebody's suit. In this case, you have them not reporting or repairing one that they put back away that led to other potential catastrophes. Do you not see what I'm seeing here, guys? This is somebody, I think, trying to create a problem. Investigators recommended an individual who had violated both of the safety protocols, quote, be removed from duties at Fort Detrick. Who's that? Why is he being charged with a crime? After concluding that they cannot be trusted to follow safety protocols. That's insane. Where is he from? I mean, doesn't it matter? Like, how is this continuing to happen with all these different overlapping conversations where these people just kind of vanish into the background? The news post could not confirm on Friday if the individual was removed. Let me read that again. They come out and they tell you, this guy, who we will not name, needs to be removed because he violated these safety protocols. They're telling you that they cannot, as of Friday, confirm that if he was ever removed at all. Investigators also found that in a separate incident, inactivated tissue samples were transferred out of maximum containment before a principal investigator authorized the transfer. I mean, this is the same story it's always been. To me, this is not clumsy. This is not accidents. These are not accidents. If we can show a consistent track record of this location doing this, it's either you have to realize that they just don't care that they're that incompetent, which I find hard to believe, or that there's something else going on here. And so here we can have this situation where they're literally bringing out samples without authorization. That's like the at the top of the list. So now you got sabotage of suits, sabotage, of multiple suits. I mean, all on top of bringing potentially pandemic-causing things outside of the lab. And we don't even know who this guy is. Or guys, by the way, because it seems there's multiple people involved. The incident report also cites occasions when changing rooms were left in disarray with stuff on the floor, which might not be a big deal when a general sense, but when you understand what they're dealing with in this high-level science, like what's the word? Just a highly sealed, sterile environment. And they're just leaving things on the floor like that. That does speak to just lazy, no one keeping, that may be just a cultural thing in the sense of like a business culture. Investigators did not believe, quote, re-examining these events in detail would assist in determining the person responsible for creating the hole in the suit that prompted the investigation. Yeah, who cares? We don't believe that looking into the very relevant overlapping parts of the story is going to help us investigate this story. Right? Why don't we look into the other suits they sabotaged to find out it's just, again, I'm being critical because I feel like we should be, but there very well may be a part of the story that this platform is not including, just to be objective. But if this is everything in front of us, which I believe it is when you break this down and look at the other reporting, doesn't that just seem like what's the use of investigating the rest of it? Especially when you don't have anybody who's been charged, no more. To me, this seems like a let's put it to bed kind of conversation. Quote, reporting of safety concerns or general concerns within the histology group has not been met with appropriate actions or reactions, which has led to a significant breakdown in the trust within the group of its leadership's ability to take safety concerns or other concerns seriously, or to address issues within group without retaliation to the party bringing up the issue. So very well may just be some ridiculous, partisanship has destroyed this country. So that very well may just be the point that these people just hate each other. I mean, that is one of the possibilities. But with all the rest we're seeing, I do feel it could be that that's the case and it's being exploited by somebody else. But how it's happening in the first place should blow your mind. Quote, it is imperative that this culture change be addressed to prevent any further breakdown in safety culture within the group as a whole. Pretty crazy. Now, again, remember, Fort Detrick, the shutdown right before this. Now, if you remember the way this went, guys, Fort Detrick shut down, right? And then we had the nursing home situation. These are sort of simultaneous for this purpose of the point. They're slightly different, but so you had the Fort Detrick location, and all around there you had all these weird outbreaks of this, pneumonia, all the ground glass opacity. Remember that? And they just went, and that was exactly what the first thing was said about whatever they called COVID, and they just stopped talking about that. The point was around the nursing home, which you could see as an extension of this, if that's what you think happened, had the same problem, had the same weird novel pneumonia, and they all started having the same ground glass opacity, same thing. And then the timing perfectly leads right overlapping with the military world, China world game, the military world games, and how, remember that the U.S. government military always excels there. Pretty much historically, they do really well. And that year they did unprecedentedly bad. Could just be coincidence, but then there's reports of military U.S. people being sick. It's all easy to look up. So the question becomes, was that literally what this, or was it by design? Now, I also understand the larger questions that we went over in this conversation about the questioning of what was there, the questioning of whether any of it's there. These are important conversations. My point, as always, was that whether or not this was the hype around what wasn't there to cause this, or it was something that they did, there are real examples of things they're doing to people, of things they're working on. And I worry that is, in fact, in the same vein. My point is, we should worry about this regardless. But I do understand the point, and I often, and I will actually include Denny Rencourt, his interview I had with him, more than one, in fact, or Denny Rencourt, excuse me, that he made multiple points about this. And I think this is the important one to consider. That his argument, as always, I make this every time, data proves COVID-19 is actually an illusion. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It could. What it means is that he did his research on this to make the point that should somebody have wanted to create an illusion of what COVID-19 was, all the tools were already there. From the combining of flu and pneumonia, which is what they did, from using false positive PCR tests, from the cycle threshold, all these different points. He proved with his data that you could have literally created exactly what they pointed to without anything. Now, let alone something that might have been involved that wasn't that severe, right? Or however you look at it. So that doesn't mean, yes, it absolutely, but it means that that the data shows those things were, and my point, the reality is he does believe that. I do too. But what this argument is framed the right way to people that need to hear it, is that the facts, the data, the math shows that everything they did created that illusion. But I always want to include, though, that it could have very well been something that was like some of those, the Ionitis group said that it was less than the flu. So if that was something that was there, if it was there at all, it was less than the flu. And that's why they had to manufacture all of this. There's so much to get into. But I'll include this for you to check out. His work is very important, in my opinion. So anyway, the point was, in regard to the trend, that ended up over the World Military Games, and then that segued right into the beginning of all of this, and that there very much was something that was going on there, in the sense of the conversation. Now, I will include this show we did, which I think is an important one. 2023, we basically went back and made this overlapping connection, revisiting Fort Detrick and the vaping overlap. That's also, remember the whole point about the I think it was, wasn't Acosta, it was the other guy's name. I'm blanking on his name. But basically, he was trying to get Trump to talk about this. And he said, Trump only wanted to talk about vaping. And there was the same vaping thing. Oh, the vaping illness, ground glass opacity. So my thought was maybe that's all it was, being called something else. But COVID origins as EcoHealth restarts coronavirus work. It's a good show to get into all of this. Now, to finish with this point, and we'll just give you a couple quick things to wrap up here about Epstein that I want you to see, and some ending points around Iran, because that does seem to be continuing before the next show we get into. I want to make sure we reiterate this again, because I wanted to point them out earlier so you saw them as we're going through. But this is just so frustrating that we deal with stuff like this. So this was the show in 2025, August. Trump admin leans into self-amplifying mRNA, samRNA or saRNA, same point, under the guise of ending mRNA. And we discuss RNA in food, which Massey and plenty of others talked about, but they're doing. They're making all transgenic vaccine. It's all going on, guys. And Massey even tried to get it in our legislation, and they didn't want it. Surprise, surprise. But this conversation is really just about the overlap where they came and said, we are stopping mRNA. And I showed you the statement they put out where it listed right in that statement that we are not stopping all of mRNA. We're stopping the $500 million discussion, but we're keeping Arcturus, we're keeping Amplitude, and we're continuing our mRNA in every other category. So right then, with his press release, why was everybody claiming that they ended mRNA? Because we live in this broken media world right now. And whether it's all the mainstream alternative screamers, or that it's all some very, because remember, the corporate media did the same thing. If the argument is they're all wanting to fight Trump because they're the deep state and he's the good guy, why wouldn't they have been like, he's lying about that? Because they're all in it when it comes to these larger agendas. We must see that by now. So this is a good show to watch if you want to understand that. It's very clear. I'll include these specific links. Arcturus, therapeutic receives U.S. FDA fast track. Now, this one was during his administration, 2025. That's obvious. This one was specifically about the swine flu, or the bird, was it the influenza? Which one was it? Anyway, H5N1. Self-amplifying. Now, remember, this goes beyond the one we talked about. In fact, my argument is that was the first one. They just changed because the original Pfizer documentation showed the H1B1N2 or whatever the original number was as self-amplifying. I showed you that before. But then it was called the different versions. Then they pointed to self-amplifying, self-spreading as the future. And both those are very real research. My point is that the argument of self-amplifying was that it continues to produce the antigen. Well, that's what this does. We know that. So why haven't we admitted that yet? It continues to produce it in your body, as we've proven 100,000 times over. So that is the thing. And I think this is largely, I think, by design. You also have this one, which is actually a COVID-19 shot. Now, this one was started in 2024, but the point is Trump and his administration are provably continuing this. And this is going. It is an mRNA self-amplifying COVID-19 shot on top of Comirnaty, which is also an mRNA shot, which I argue is self-amplifying based on the reality of what it does. Either way, it is out there. And they're all, I mean, not only are Trump just told you it was the best thing since sliced bread again, in front of Davos, in front of everybody, and we're pretending they're stopping. Now, here is Arcturus, but you can get into all the rest of it. This is 5 months ago. Arcturus Therapeutics advances mRNA therapeutics pipeline. Look at that, guys. We're right back in the same place. Moderna, the plug and play pipeline platform, it's the same thing. All they did was just move the window dressing, guys, with strong financial performance and strategic focus. Yes, it's all still continuing with direct support from the U.S. government on the record. This one's from January 12th, 2026. Arcturus Therapeutics maps near-term milestones for CF mRNA therapy. Arcturus 810 at JP Morgan conference. So all these different mRNA and shots and vaccines, yes, that's the future, guys. Now, whether or not you think that these things are dangerous or not is when it matters, I think. But to the point is them lying about it. That matters. Why would they go, we're not doing that anymore, and then keep doing it? Because they don't want people knowing that, quite obviously. Now, I mean, shouldn't have to include it, but obviously, day one Stargate. Here's our COVID-19, Larry Ellison, OpenAI, SoftBank, Israel connection. We're making COVID-19 shots with AI. Day one. And that didn't change everybody's minds. How is that possible? Clearly, this is not going away, guys. So we need to keep talking about it. And the Biolab overlap and all the rest of it, we should be asking ourselves whether there's something going on to sort of drive us into a certain place, right? To get our minds in a certain location and to get us pointing at the wrong person or just pointing at, because really, no matter how you frame that, the argument can be laid in any direction. And so it's, in my mind, it's not about blaming anybody. It's about, somebody will do that, but it's about creating the risk that can be used to rationalize the action. It's always what they do. So keep that in mind. Now, to end with a couple of overlapping things here, I always do that. I get the word stuck in my head. This is very telling to me, and it's about Epstein and the files. But right now, how clear it is that they're drowning in this, pretty much the entirety of the government. But right now, the worst is the people that have been claiming they want to expose this and are still pretending like Trump is doing that. And Massey has been tearing him apart because he's standing by this and calling for it. Now, we should, as always, question whether he's got different intentions and motivations. Always question that for everybody. But in regard to what he's doing, it's relevant because he's out there going, we need to see this and you have a right to see it. Yep, I agree. Even if he's got different intentions. So here's something that came out. This person who I'm not familiar with came out and said, here's Massey telling you that he got all the files on a drive and that he's, basically he has it and he hasn't released it becomes the point. So let's play the clip first. Here's what's going around. Oh, that's the one. See, I knew I did that earlier. Hold on a second. Not that you need to know this as I'm grabbing it, but I knew I did it. Didn't I just delete that? And I didn't listen to myself. Hold on. Here it is. All right.
It's that simple.
Why do you think he is working so hard not to get them released for so many months? What do you think the real reason is?
These files implicate billionaires and friends of his and political donors that he's trying to protect. And Epstein also had close ties to our own intelligence agencies and Israel's intelligence agencies. That's why there's so much effort in trying to stop this. And I do believe they'll try to stop it somewhere else. And that's going to backfire on them too.
So the president.
Now here's what's interesting. There we go. Oops. So here's what he frames about this. Okay. Last night I received a flash drive containing the complete files belonging to Jeffrey Epstein, claiming this is what Massey is saying, right? Here, this is what I find so fascinating about this. Now, look, first of all, what he said was very obvious. It's just saying Epstein files are hiding it. This is obvious. And so it's interesting that it becomes, there's a lot of information, like with that woman, for example, Minnesota. That's AI, right? It becomes, well, it's true anyway. Like, well, I disagree with what, that's not actually the reality of what's happening. But either way, it could be. But doesn't it matter that somebody had to make that? And somebody pointed out in the comments, it's like, well, you can't even consider that they might have done that in order to make you think that they tried to hide it. Well, I do say that. I say it every time. The possibility could be that video was made to make you think that there's nothing going, that basically that they have to fake that, like my argument is, and therefore it's probably not happening. But I can also consider that somebody would make it for me to think that. And the opposite's the case. I make this point every time. Always consider every possible motivation, but I'll always give you my opinion, right? But so in this case, what he said, obviously, but it matters in the long run. I think that's a larger point overall. But this is what I asked. This is what Grok has to say. Check this out. There's multiple points in this. I said, when is this from? It says the video from Twitter shows Steve Bannon, not Massey, which I didn't even suggest that it did, speaking to reporters in a crowd. And it says the original clip dates to August 2017, shortly after Bannon was removed. The current post incorrectly captions the video, talking about receiving an Epstein flash drive. That's fabricated AI-generated hoax. Okay, hold on. Let me check again. I asked it I just wanted to see what it said. I just refreshed, did a new one. The post you linked was posted February 7, 2026. It says the video in that post shows a bearded man in a suit surrounded by journalists. It says the caption attributes the clip to Keir Starmer. No, it doesn't. It says, however, it appears to be a misattribution. Keir Starmer is not known to have a full beard. The clip likely... Okay, this is just insane to me. I'm of the mind that this platform, the Grok, has been... it is haywired right now because they're trying to cover so much stuff up. It's like we saw with the South African point where people were asking for the weather and it was telling them South African genocide. I mean, you could ask the same question twice and it's giving me two different answers. And both of them are wrong. No, it's not Keir Starmer. No, it's not Steve Bannon. I just find that insane. And this is why we should not be taking at face value any of this stuff, mostly because it can be manipulated by the person who's in control of it, but also because it could just be wrong all the time. I find that really interesting. Now, here's what Massey had to say. Fake news. I don't have a flash drive. Why make up stuff when the reality itself is so shocking and disgusting, right? Why do people have to manufacture these things? I actually think, and that's the reason I brought up the AI point with the woman in Minnesota. I actually think it's because it's like a meta. You're trying to create the illusion, right? That this is something people will take at face value. Oh my God, he got a file. But then if it turns out to be fake, then you start to doubt all the rest of what's coming out, or that you can makes you doubt what Massey is doing. Why isn't he releasing the file, the drive he has? I'm seeing that all over Twitter today, but none of that's true. I just want you to think about the different layers of manipulation and how people are trying to muddy the waters. And at that same point, we should be skeptical of Massey and whether he's got different intentions. My gut is, I don't think that's the case right now. I guess we'll find out. But he goes, this is lie too. And shows that video that we've shown already of him talking about Israel. So it's funny that it doesn't matter that you misrepresented him. Oh, there, it finally got a fact check. There is no such flash drive. But what's funny is that, because you pointed to something else that shows him talking about Israel, therefore it shouldn't matter that I made that up. That's what you get. You can't just be like, oops, my mistake. Or what that shows me is deliberate manipulation and almost trying to change the way people logically think about things. It shouldn't matter about the facts if we end up getting what we want. It's kind of the ultimate point there. Here's what Massey said. This is posted on the 7th in regard to the Epstein scandal.
I think historically, when we look back at the Epstein scandal, it's going to be bigger than Watergate. And it's going to be, by the way, the president didn't go to jail. The attorney general did. It's going to be bigger than Iran-Contra. And here's why. It spans 4 administrations. It's deeper than any political thing on the surface.
And of course, unfortunately, he's talking to Glenn Beck when he has this conversation, somebody who's actively trying to not have this real conversation, somebody who's actively trying to drive the country to war with Iran, the person who's actively trying, it's just, unfortunately, but that's what happens because these people have big platforms. But at least he's putting them on. I will say that.
And so I think in terms of the number of people who are affected, I mean, how many people were affected by Iran-Contra, okay, or Watergate? I mean, specifically in that instance. Obviously, everybody's affected when there's a lack of transparency and bad or fraudulent things happening. But I mean, directly affected or implicated, that was a finite group of people in both of those. Here we have what seems to be almost an infinite number of people involved with Jeffrey Epstein. At least we don't even know yet how many there were in the criminal enterprise or the seedy part of it. And it's like that Spider-Man meme where there's 6 Spider-Men, they all look the same and they're pointing at each other. You've got all these billionaires pointing at each other. You're in the Epstein. No, you're in the Epstein. No, you are in the Epstein. It's you who is in the Epstein files. And you're the one who went to the island. I didn't go to the island. Anyways, there's sort of this circular finger pointing that's going on. But I think it's a scandal that is longer in time, involved multiple administrations.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, clearly, the effect this could have was monumental because it is long term and it's not partisan. But they're so desperately trying to make it like that. Because if you think of it from the position of whoever's, the higher level people who want this, it's not about left and right. This implicates the entirety of the system. But if you can manage to pigeonhole, make it, it's only that side. Well, what that effectively does, as I'm always pointing out, is stop it. It allows it to not actually be stopped because it's not the full picture. So, and so the government doesn't go down. The system doesn't go down. The Epstein network doesn't go down. Whoever's actually running it doesn't go down. All you do is frame it on a path of the story. It makes sure it continues. And that's why people that I'm always pointing out in the Glenn Becks and Alex Jones, their job seems to be to make sure you only blame it on one side. Whether they even know that or not, it's for you to decide. Now here, with what Massey was just saying, is exactly what's going on. There's a whole thing going on. I decided not to bring it in today, but like Michael Tracy and plenty of others, using what is a valid point, that there is a lot of subjective information in these files that cannot be used unless there's more to go with it to make a case in court, because they're subjective. But there's also there's, like I keep showing you, multiple examples of provable information that should be investigated. So when you have Michael Tracy or others going, there's nothing to go on here, it makes me question their integrity. It makes me question what they're really doing there or whether they can even look into this properly. But overall, now you're getting this partisan side of it for people basically going, why don't you show me where the crimes are? I don't see any crimes. Like almost like blithely, not shy, like almost like what's the right word? Like in a very juvenile way, going like, why don't you show me where the crimes are? Well, where are the crimes? You're talking about the Epstein files. You're talking about children being abused and women being raped. And the examples I'm thinking of, by the way, the very 2 people I'm talking about were the ones before this administration going, we have to bring the Epstein files down. Now they're out there jokingly going, where are the crimes? Well, because the point is that Trump doesn't want this to be pointed to. So now it becomes, well, it's all a bunch of nothing burger. Don't look at it anymore. It's just mind blowing, isn't it? And so here you have a kind of an extension of that conversation. This is Prince Andrew's former girlfriend, Lady Victoria Hervey, saying that if you're not in the Epstein files, you should be embarrassed, essentially, that the cool people ended up in these files. Ro Khanna says, this is why I coined the phrase Epstein class. This is why the Epstein class needs to go. These people put belonging to a club of the rich and powerful over speaking out against pedophiles and the rape of working class girls. Well, and it wasn't just working class girls, but also just because he's saying this doesn't mean we shouldn't question and investigate and down him like we do with everybody. Don't make false accusations. Don't insinuate. But Massey, Ro Khanna, it should matter whether or not everybody should be given the same skepticism is the right way to frame that. But I'm glad he's making this point, and I'm glad they're continuing to call it out. So here's what she says. I honestly can't believe she made this point this early.
He knew everybody that was very powerful. So like if you were on the scene and you were powerful, like to be honest, like if you're not in those files, it would be an insult because it just means that you were a bit of a loser.
Right. So the people who aren't in the files are leakers.
Yes.
Okay. Are you in the files?
Well, of course I am, because it's any journalist that wrote about it.
Well, you see, this is a very dishonest way to frame that, guys, because the truth, stupid thing. It's not, you have, well, first of all, that's not actually true, because they redacted, and this is the thing we're going to get into in probably in one of the next shows, is they didn't, right now you have a point going around that I just showed you in the last show about the redaction and about like the State Department, the Secretary of State, the right, and we need guidance on how to do this. And I showed you that just yesterday. It's important, but if we're going to be accurate, not just try to, yes, I don't like the FBI as well, but if we're going to be accurate, what it's saying is we are asking for guidance on what to do in these situations. And as far as I can tell, there's not like a response that says redact their names. So it could be somebody with good intention, the FBI, going, okay, we're not, I need some direction here. Why, we need to know who, these are very famous people right now. And what happened, if you remember correctly, is they were then told to just redact everyone other than Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, which actually didn't even happen because they're just either clumsy or that was by design. But that was the ultimate outcome. That was a violation of the law of the Epstein Act. But it's interesting to think about, because you get then partisans that come out and go, this is proof, like I keep trying to show you. Even though I do think it's important, that becomes a point of contention that makes people ignore the real stuff. And the reality is that it matters, and they were asking for direction, and we can prove that they did basically redact all these people's names. But that shouldn't mean that this is the point of the email was, walk me through how we cover this up, because that's not really what it said. But it's important. And so over the connection here is, hold on, what was it? There's one other point I was going to make. Well, back to her. The interesting thing here is that she's basically gloating, right? Oh, that's what it was. That, so you have people's names in there. That some of them did end up, but the point was they did redact most everybody's names. And so not every journalist showed up. Not everybody's name showed up. So you're almost in a way trying to turn this and say, well, it's almost kind of a nothing thing, right, everybody? And because then we can act like it's a funny. Then we can go, oh, well, you were cool if you were in the files. You're getting the most disgusting, sniveling, groveling, the kind of people that will gravitate to power at all costs. And they're all over the mainstream alternative media who want to just go, oh, now this is the new thing, right? Or Nick Fuentes. Epstein was cool. Like, they've already been doing this. They had conversations before we even got here about like why Maxwell was a victim, right? They've been trying to do this. And I just think it's so obvious. Here she is saying, if you're not cool, if you're in the files. I just blown away. I was blown away. To me, as I keep showing you, I think that's just desperation. I think somebody's like, get out there. We need to change the narrative. We're losing right now. That's what I think. So Massey points out another important connection. Howard Lutnick, which we already knew if you've been paying attention, but this gets even more important because now the average person is seeing on full display that somebody who is tied to the hip of Donald Trump is blatantly lying about being this involved with Epstein. But so too are all the rest of them, by the way. According to legal documents and emails, Epstein and Lutnick did business together, and Lutnick vacationed on his island. Long after Lutnick claims they parted ways, and long after Epstein was known as a sexual offender. Doesn't that matter, guys? Especially to all the conservatives who can recognize that the Epstein files are basically beginning to be represented in this administration. But let's not take that as partisan, because you know my opinion. If you're watching the show, it's not partisan. It's all over the map. It's our government. But right now, it seems packed with people like this. I find that pretty crazy. Here's a clip of what Howard Lutnick did when Trump called the Epstein files that we can see right now that aren't fake, when he called them a hoax. For what, the third time, I guess?
They're both very good.
Mr. President.
The two Kevins, very good.
Mr. President, is Vice President Vance hosting a gathering this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
Is he working on what?
Is he hosting some kind of gathering of top advisors this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
I don't know. I could ask you that question. I don't know of it, but I think here's the man right here.
I saw it reported today, and it's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation, and I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Yeah, remember they lied about that. Wah, wah. I mean, it's over and over and over, guys. Now, it's not about the specific meeting, but the reality was that was the case, and they did, and they have been. I mean, this is just what they do. It's not left and right. They lie, guys. They lie like they're breathing because they don't want you to feel like you're on the inside.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country.
That's worthy of laughing at right there. Not even conservatives think that anymore.
And that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit. Okay?
When Trump cusses like that, I think it stands out. I rarely see him do that, and I think it shows that you could think for yourself. We know where we are right now. That was not that long ago. Are we this ridiculous? Or are we unable? I don't think so. I think most people, conservatives included, are right now going, wow, man, like this is just outrageous. But Lutnick couldn't stop himself from chuckling the moment it got brought up. Doesn't that seem interesting with what we know? I mean, I think these people are bent on trying to create the impression that they couldn't care less. We're all just a bunch of carefree people. We're not even involved, and it's just not true. Everybody can see that. Now, Nick Dank Memes says, honestly, if this wasn't the breaking point for you, I don't really value your opinion at all. Trisha Hope, whoever that is, says they're talking about the polls of Trump going down. Again, polls taken for what you want, but people, I pretty clearly can see people shifting around this. She says he told his loyal supporters he no longer wanted their support. We're just giving him what he wants. And Nick Dank Meme says, if this tweet, if this me or the Truth Social was not the breaking point, I don't value your opinion. Remember what Trump said. When it came to the Epstein files, mentions Russia and fake things. We all know both sides lie, the media lies. Yes, we get it. And I agree. Goes on to say, also, unlike Republicans, they stick together like glue. Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Oh, is that what we're going to forever do? And my past supporters, capital past supporters, have brought this into this bull SHIT hook, line, and sinker, or bought into it, excuse me. So think about the way he frames that. They bought into this, which means they're being manipulated. So they're not choosing to deliberately, screw you, Trump. They're being manipulated by your own statement. They bought into a manipulation, right? And then they're not your supporters anymore because, that means you're not on my side because you got manipulated. That's just the dumbest. That is because it's not even what's happening, to be honest. This is the way he's just trying to scare and shout people back into place because he knew he was losing support. It's what's the word? I'm trying to think of the term for blood when it's just gushing out. It's whatever. He's clearly on a rapid pace right now, losing people because it's that obvious. I don't need to qualify that, guys. That's very, very clear. In this case, he continues by calling you past supporters if you care that he's lying about that. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years. So again, you're saying they're being played. So but people are tricked. It's not that's not a willful decision to go, it's just, I think it speaks for itself. He says, had more success in 6 months than perhaps any president. No, you haven't, man. No, you haven't, bud. All these people want to talk about with strong prodding by the fake news and Fox News talked about it too, right? Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about taking all of our incredible, unprecedented success because I don't want their support anymore. That's what he said. That's so childish. It pains me. Like I'm embarrassed for him. That's what he's doing out there. Saying, yeah, you got any more? It's my ball. I'm going home. That's what it feels like. And you're talking about people who acknowledge the truth of this that you're lying about. And all it really comes down to is weak people who will fall for that, who care more about being in his good graces, his team, than the truth. Sad. And tell me that's not desperate. How is that not the most desperate thing in the conversation? This is pretty funny. Catherine Austin Fitts, just as always, breaking it down. People tend to hear her arguments that are about, like before the selection, where she said that she could argue that Trump might have been the better pick, right? And that we talked about that. And I agreed with her, but we both do agree and did in that interview about the bigger reality of the two-party illusion and how, and so people tend to hear some of these arguments and then assume that she's a Trump supporting right winger. That's what they do. And so this person invites her on. I haven't seen the whole thing. Catherine Austin Fitts basically tells some podcaster dude who is apparently still suffering from, he writes, Q-tardation, I think you're just smoking dope if you think arrests are coming. I'm going to let it play through, just so you can listen to it for yourself. There's a lot of interesting points in here that I could make, but it's just, this is somebody who clearly still buys drinks the Kool-Aid. They believe mass arrests are coming down, like from the Q point, like military tribunal, that the idea is that all the deep state's going down. I mean, guys, there is nothing to give you that impression. In fact, there's tons to show the opposite. I know you all know this. But the fact that there are still people who would just hold on to what is genuinely hopium, just blind, I really believe it because he said so. That's Santa Claus territory, guys. That's wild. Catherine Austin Fitz has none of it.
Do you believe that the arrests will happen under Trump? Will we see justice happen under Trump? Will we see people like Bill Clinton, Obama arrested and brought to justice? And in my mind, if we do see that, is that because it's just the dark handing the keys off to the light optically, and that they're going to give up their pawns, they're going to sacrifice a few of their deep state players? Do you think we're going to see
I feel bad for him.
Justice with certain people being arrested?
So let me answer it this way. Trump was one of Epstein's closest friends. Howard Lutnick was his next door neighbor. The first lady was his girlfriend. So if you look at the relationships of the Trump administration to the Epstein files, and if you look at the relationship of Epstein to Israel and the Mossad, and the president's complete loyalty to Israel, many would say above and beyond the United States, I think you're just smoking dope to think that.
I think, hold on, just hear me out on this. I think there are going to be arrests, but I think it'll be for the optics. I think it's just so people can get behind Trump and cheerlead even more and bis boom rah rah. You know, I think that they're going to give up some of their deep state players. I think they're going to be like sacrifices on the chessboard. You get what I'm saying?
So I call them chew toys. So Fauci's a chew toy, Gates is a chew toy. They're chew toys. So you give the dog a chew toy.
Right.
But you know, Trump has been in power for a year. I don't know of one arrest.
I think it's possible that they're coming, and I'm gonna. But like I said,
you know something, I got to tell you, if you look at the speed that they can bring up data centers.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, Trump did that day one.
Yeah.
You know, Stargate. So.
It's just nuts, isn't it? I mean, like, seriously, someone in the chat says apparently he's got a huge channel on YouTube. Doesn't surprise me. You know, it's just look, you can have hope, but just be real. I'm just blindly hoping into the wind that this actually happens, and I want it to. Good, that's okay. But you're rooting it on some kind of a logical, you know, like what you see in this. There's 2 points to make. What you see is people doing this kind of argument where, you know, that it's like you're some kind of political analysis, and it's like, well, the chessboard and the deep state. There's no facts in there. There's nothing logical in there. That's all just some weird chess analogy to make the argument that he's going to secretly do everything you ever wanted, other than all the facts and evidence that do not back that up. It's frustrating that we even have to engage with that. Like that's an honest argument. I mean, it might as well be that the aliens will come and save them from the problem, you know, which who knows, possible, but it's not. There's nothing in any way to go on. And on top of that, what he did there at the end is something I deal with all the time in close circumstances as well, where, so you're in this situation and it's very, very clear that it's pro-Trump, MAGA, Q, whatever it is, like just all the way. Tribunals, Trump support, the whole thing. And then when you get confronted with something that is very challenging, that is just pure logic, it shifts into, whoa, hold on. You know, I think it could be a move to, you know, kind of sacrifice that in order to, you know, the idea being that it is, I'm kind of suggesting Trump is the bad guy, but not really the bad guy, but just not the good we want to be. But he's going to do this in order to pacify us from doing more. But the argument suggests that they're on the side of covering this up. But you just laid all this out of the argument that they're the ones that are going to put people into jail. How can you shift from they'll save us with arrest and tribunals to the arrest will pacify us? And that means, you know, it's so infuriating. But this is where you got the sort of like, we're not Republicans anymore, we're patriots. And you have Democrats and rhinos, and then we're the patriots. It's like, well, that's a two-party illusion. You just jammed over the other people into the Democrat Party, and now you're still the patriot Republican side. It's the same game. But I was at least glad when that started to see people that were differentiating from the left-right, but it just became an extension of it. And so all this is how this continues to go. And all I'm really trying to show is there's this kind of naive, childlike wish that ends up overtaking cold, hard facts in front of us. And as always, Catherine has no patience for that. That's why I love her for it. Well, let's continue. Only a few more points to show you. And that's Night Watch Nate, by the way. He's in the chat. He's the one that shared that, so check him out. Jason Bassler says, just to include these, just ending a few points before we show some stuff about Iran, just last 4 points on that. Bassler says something important that doesn't get brought up enough, at least not in the mainstream conversation. Epstein's most disturbing property wasn't the island. It was Zorro Ranch, 7,500 acres in New Mexico on public land. Let's not forget the weird New Mexico overlapping conversations. Leased for $200 a year. It has a private airstrip, underground tunnels and rooms, and a 6-foot nude portrait of Maxwell on a gold dagger. Victims testified abuse happened there. So there is testimony, subjective or not, because they're claiming that they were abused there, which would mean that they should investigate that further. The ranch was never raided. The investigation stalled. Quietly sold through shell companies. Not a ranch, a crime scene hiding in plain sight. These kind of points cannot be denied. Look into this for yourself. Please do. Don't take face value at text on Twitter. He's right, though. And what does that show you? Not Biden, not Trump, nobody. And this is not about Epstein at this point. It is, especially if you want to genuinely look into the reality of what the unanswered questions to what actually happened to him. But whether dead or not, the point is this is much bigger than Jeffrey Epstein. Right. By the way, on a side note, too, there's a lot going around about whether he was seen. That's been happening over the years. We shouldn't ignore it, but Twitter called it an AI image, but maybe that's covering it up. It's just, there's so much noise. It's hard to know, but we should never dismiss, consider, question. But on top of that, though, there's a Fortnite point that came out. People are saying that Jeffrey Epstein's tag, like little St. James Jeff or something like that, was being used on Fortnite. And turns out it was, except, at least as the story goes, Fortnite and others and fact checks, they came out right away. And we're like, no, it turns out it was a user who played a joke and saw it in the files and changed his name to meet that. But I bet you somebody out there who has more in-depth investigation in regard to this platform could find out whether it was in fact the old one versus the new one. I'd be interested in that. But as it stands, it seems the story was quickly rushed out that it was, oh my God, we found him. He's using this Fortnite in conjunction with, here's his picture with somebody found. And now it's been watered down a bit. Look into it. I probably will even more, just because I've looked into it today, but I haven't gone too deep on it. I will just try and flesh it out. Just be skeptical, guys. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. And as I keep saying, even if that turns out to be true, we don't need it. If it's real, we should want it, but we don't, in the sense of investigation, but we don't need it. You have enough evidence right now to put all these people in jail. Don't miss the forest for the trees. It's always what happens. And I already see it happening right now. In regard to the Israel overlap, one post, going underground, always doing a good job on this, talking with former Israeli intelligence officer, Ari Ben Menashe. Here's what he has to say about the Russian allegation, which you guys already know, but from an former Israeli intelligence, it's interesting to see what he says about this. Because if you haven't seen, the entirety of the Western media and a lot of the mainstream alternative are like, Epstein was a Russian spy. Can't you tell by all the evidence of connections to Israel? Clearly a Russian spy. But as I said, there is a Russian overlap. There's a connection there, but it's one piece versus 1,000, and you're making it about that. It seems like a clear deviation, or rather deflection.
You may have noticed, maybe even where you are in Canada, they're trying to pin Putin to blame for Jeffrey Epstein as regards the information that's come out, these 3 million documents. You contend that there is a Russian angle as well as an Israeli angle, but it's not exactly Vladimir Putin.
No, well, the Israelis did work with the Russians, going back actually to Soviet days, going back to the 80s, yes? And but this calling Epstein a Russian or a Soviet agent is nonsense. I mean, they're trying to cover up. It's a cover-up.
Yeah,
trying to cover up for
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk. He just said it is Russia. That, of course, is Poland that didn't enforce the ICC warrant on Netanyahu.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know which.
Maybe it's.
Yeah, who's doing the cover-up?
I'm sure the Israelis are putting it out that he's a Russian agent. He was a Russian agent.
Now, to be objective and be clear, that was his opinion. I think that was obvious, but in case that wasn't clear on the podcast, that his opinion is that it was Israel putting it out. But it's just obvious. It's embarrassing to make that argument. Obviously, it's a possibility. But like I said, you have a few connections here, and you've got a lifetime of obvious on the record everybody from Maxwell's father to Maxwell himself to all these different connections directly to Mossad, and on top of the things you could read in his own emails. It just seems like an obvious deflection. And on the note of Netanyahu, well, guess what? He's on his way back to Washington, guys, because that's the way this works. The president of the United States is about to meet with Donald Trump, guys. Here it comes. And the frustrating part of this is it happens constantly while they're committing genocide and while this man is quite literally an international war criminal. By law of the international community, he is supposed to be arrested by anybody involved with the international community, like the United States. With the ICC and ICJ. And nope, they're going to let him walk right back in. What is this? Actually, I'll end with a clip from Ron Paul that talks about this very point and overlaps with Iran in regard to how many times he's met with Netanyahu. But let's finish quickly with some points about Iran, as I said, just to keep this in your mind, because I'm not going to get into it in depth here, but it is building. And I've given you some stuff to think on in the last so many shows. But as John Hoffman writes, and this is where it's at right now, he says, United States is steamrolling toward another Middle East crisis of its own making. And he says negotiations between Iran, this on the 4th, and the U.S. scheduled for Friday, that was yesterday, are now reportedly canceled because spoilers in Washington and Israel pushed the same poison pills that led to the 12-day war. And by the way, the same thing they do in every single example that is easy to prove. Unless you just take the narrative of the Zionists committing genocide and the U.S. government that lies to you every day. The truth is you could prove 100 times over that they deliberately sabotage these deals. Let's be clear. Israeli politicians have publicly said that Netanyahu has continually sabotaged the deal. His own people protest against him for doing that. And yet we can't have an honest conversation about that in this country. Seems to me that shows you which place is more compromised than anywhere else. The truth is that they've already been trying to blow this up. And of course, then what you get right now is the totally pro-U.S. America first Patrick Bet-David that says Iran has zero intention of negotiating. Here's the playbook. Stall until domestic protests fade and the regime stabilizes. Stall until Trump is out. Quietly continue advancing his nuclear program. God, this guy just increasingly shows his ignorance in the conversation or his deliberate dishonesty, because the truth is, the lie about the entire thing, it's built, like just quickly, I was going to show it after, but let's not forget, this got exposed by, what is it? It was Italian media, fake accounts, likes of the Shah of Iran. What was it? It's right here. Almost 1 billion tweets coming from fake accounts. They can prove are fake accounts that they were astroturfing to make you think the Shah was popular. It's just so very obvious. The protests themselves were proven, as I've shown you many times over, to be rushed full with foreign actors who were provably, admittedly armed by Israeli Mossad. Their media promoted this. They armed the protesters, which makes them not protesters anymore, and they weren't Iranian protesters. Or the fact that the Mossad, as well as Pompeo, openly told you that they were on the street alongside them. This has always been a regime change. And if we can't look at the last 7 times they tried it and make sense of it, it's just willful ignorance, guys. But then stall until Trump is out. Oh, of course, because the Democrats will let it all happen. You mean aside from the exact opposite? You mean aside from Biden and Trump having the same policy against Iran? These people are either so bad at what they do or they're misleading you for their partisan gain. Delay isn't diplomacy, it's strategy. Okay, well, as Gerald Salente points out, somebody you should very much listen to more than Patrick Bet-David, never trust the IRCG, the Iranian military. While it was the Trump administration that pretended to be sincere about negotiations so Israel could carry out a sneak attack in June. Keep selling the BS. That's exactly what happened. I told you that last time. They pretended. You could look at it one of two ways. Trump either pretended in order to let them do that, or Trump was played and thought they were negotiating and Israel attacked anyway, and then he still didn't tell you that, which shows you what's really going on. But you have to understand, we know this happened. This has been publicly admitted. So right now, the question is he doing it again? But Patrick Bet-David, Mark Levin, they're like go after, bomb them, attack, because that's, a major world war is not a big deal, right? For what end? What's America first about this, Mark? How is this in the interest of Americans? You mean because of all the lies you spin about what Iran is doing? I mean, it's incessant, guys. And they're lying to you on the record in every possible way about what's actually happening. To put back the crown prince, because that's democracy? Was he voted? Was he elected? Do they want that? No, none of that. None. But democracy, because the Shah's son, by blood, should be in power. They just don't care anymore, guys. Now, I'll include this show discussing that if you want to watch it. Massive astroturfing of Iran protests exposed. And I will leave you with Ron Paul continuing to this very day to break it all down for you, to expose the reality of the illusion of of everything. I actually believe right now that both Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul are, not just right now, for a long time. I respect them both immensely, but are continuing, just like we all should, day by day, to expand and grow in their understanding of how dark and broken this really is right now. And that's not a suggestion of that we're screwed, that's all bad. It's quite the opposite. It's that it's becoming so obvious and so outlined because we are beginning to chip it away. I'm convinced of that. But don't take my word for it. Question it, research this, look at the source material, and understand that you can prove it to yourself if you just want to. And I mean, prove it. And I rarely use that term. I never use it frivolously. Not just evidence and suggestion, but prove that they're lying to you if you really wanted to, with most of the points you made today. American conservative Ron Paul questions Netanyahu's 6th meeting with President Trump. I believe it's more than that when you include ones that weren't in a set meeting. But overall, how does that not show you what's going on? When somebody like Ron Paul is willing to stand up and make this case, we need to understand how bad and obvious it really is. Time to wake up, guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Appreciate all your support. Possibly actually a show tomorrow. I'm really just, going at it right now. It's important to me that we not just continue to do the work, but the continuity. Like, I want to get to a place to where I can, I don't get into my personal life all that much, but just what I deal with around it, family and obligations I have with my family and so on. The point for me is that it can be difficult to do a show and then continually do them, because the research I do pretty much takes all day and it just becomes like a week-long process. But it's important to me to do that regardless of how much commitment it takes. Because if we continue the day-to-day, like, it allows us to, like, it's almost, we're having a day-to-day conversation, right? This is continuing from yesterday. Now it'll continue to tomorrow, and we'll continue to connect these dots. And I think that reaches so much more. So I'm just being honest about this for you guys. I know you're all here because you believe in this, right? But more coming your way as always. But if we don't, make sure we're getting the clips out there, information, like, if you guys want to make these clips, I'm telling everybody, tag me, we'll share them, right? Cut out the piece you think is important, get that some reach. But as always, thank you for being here. Couldn't do this without you. You are the last American vagabond. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant. Nope. I almost did it again. Sorry for doing that last time. I see Orwell glaring at me right now. Here's the video we're going to end with. Thank you for being here.
Media is reporting that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will make yet another trip to Washington, his 6th in 1 year, where he is expected to again pressure President Trump to launch a war on Iran. Last time he was in the U.S. in December, the regime change protests in Iran were launched. What does he have up his sleeve this time? How can it be that a foreign leader has more say on whether we go to war than the U.S. Congress? Here's what we do know. Whether Trump launches a war or not, the massive military buildup in the Middle East has already cost us billions of dollars. Those are billions that, instead of helping to actually make America great again, will only make the military-industrial complex greater. All the American people will see is the continuing destruction of the dollar, and with it, more inflation and a lower standard of living at home. And of course, we will see a war supplemental spending bill on top of the $1 trillion military budget for the year. Thanks for listening.